Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and those undecided. I'm a theologian, and my area of concern is dogmatic theology. What is it that we are bidden to believe? The problem is that we don't know Islam. We have been caught up in the liberal myth that all faiths are equal, that the Abrahamic faiths are unto themselves valid, and that we ought to invite everyone to a giant luncheon and bask in this false notion of friendship. The truth is, Islam is an insidious, fascist system. It's more than a religion. Islam's view of the world is a pernicious view. In the Middle Ages, the Church taught extra ecclesia nullam salus. Outside the Church there is no salvation. In the last centuries there has been a tremendous move in the development of doctrine. Even the Roman Catholics of late in September celebrated the life and sanctity of John Henry Newman, without whom we can't understand the development of doctrine properly. And I must tell you, I have a personal devotion to the late Cardinal Newman. He is very often in my prayers. Christianity, by developing, has moved away from this kind of Neanderthal thinking. Islam retains it with a force. Islam sees the world in two ways. That is the Dar al-Islam, the house of Islam, the house of the saved. Those who are going to heaven, they don't have to stop and go on the Monopoly board and collect $200. It's straight in. And the Dar al-Harb, the house of war, the house of the sword. All those who are not Muslim. Within the Dar al-Harb, there is a category called Dhimmi, a protected, somewhat protected minority of Jews and Christians called by Muhammad Ummah al-Khatib, people of the book. Not because we are custodians of eternal verities any longer after the revelations of Muhammad, but there is a historical connection between the prophets all the way to Muhammad. It still doesn't get us off the hook. Islam is a system of doctrine no less than any other religion, and we don't know those doctrines. One of the most insidious of Muslim doctrines is that called taqiyya, in which you are bidden to lie bold-facedly in order to subvert the enemy. And the enemy is anyone who sits outside the pale of Islam. What separates Jews and Christians from Islam is a very simple but very necessary doctrine inherent to our Judeo-Christian tradition, and that is free will. Islam rejects free will. Islam instead is ruled by qisma, by fate, fatalism, which in the end does not allow for the taking of human responsibility. People don't take responsibility for what goes on in the world. They react. They are not bound to produce positively. I'm delighted that natural law was mentioned here. For a few years of my sordid and checkered career, I taught international law at Seton Hall University. And I asked the 65 attorneys who were present how many were familiar with natural law. I think 3 hands went up, and I said to them, "You must have gone to school at a Catholic university." And the response was affirmative. We are not teaching natural law. We are not making any reference to it. The Constitution of the United States is a natural law document. The Declaration of Independence affirms natural law, which is derived by God's will. And natural law appeals to the doctrine of free will. And therefore, in a democratic society, individuals take responsibility for who and what they are and what they do. Islam is by its very nature anti-democratic because it does not posit responsibility in the will of the individual or in collective will. And therefore it is theologically inherently flawed. And I say this with all deliberate political incorrectness. I revel in my political incorrectness, almost to the point of arrogance, but it's earned arrogance, I assure you. We have got to learn the documents of Islam, we've got to learn their traditions, and we've got to be able to discern when they lie to us bold-facedly. Now, this may be a very nice academic discussion, and I know that it is more than an academic discussion. It is a discussion among people who are profoundly well-informed and of goodwill. But as a retired Israeli diplomat, let me tell you, for us it is not an academic discussion. We are on the front lines fighting for our very lives against a civilization or lack thereof that refuses to acknowledge the legitimacy of our being. Islam refuses to acknowledge the legitimacy of the being of Western civilization. There is no symmetry in relations between Islam and other religious and political entities. There is no respect. There is no reciprocity. And therein lies the problem. Jews and Christians in the last centuries, in spite of some terrible historical moments of late, have learned to respect each other and even, thank God, to like each other. But what has happened in our relations to the Muslim world is that a jihad has been proclaimed as an eternal battle, and we, in our benign musings, pondering the equality of everyone, have allowed the very real enemy to infiltrate our civilization and even our consciences. Dear hearts, we are at war, and let us not make any bones about it. I must say, having just returned from Israel, and having been 200 miles from the turmoil in Egypt, and you don't feel it at all in the streets of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, life goes on quite normally for what passes as normal in Israel, given 6 million Jews. We know that the Middle East and the Islamic world is hell-bent for our destruction. That is their perception of a divine mandate. And there is no way in being nice to the enemy. Taqiyya, the doctrine of the willful lie for the sake of the cause, lies at the heart of how they see us. There is murder, mayhem, and hysteria out there. And I must say that our geniuses in the national capital in Washington have reached a level of stupidity to the point where they couldn't even direct a band of vampires to a blood bank. I've said it, haven't I? I didn't want to leave you with a morose and depressed state this morning. It's Monday, and we must face the week with at least a smile. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be part of this distinguished panel. God bless.